Hi, my name is Leslie Zendolka, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker, proud adoptive parent, and one of the many instructors for AdoptionEducationClasses.com. Today I'm here to speak to you about what to expect when arriving home with the internationally adopted child. Before we begin, I'd like to talk about some food for thought. Children of adoption are just as normal as any other children. International adoption is just another way to form a family. Although adopting a child of another race is not for everyone. We must put adoption in the context of the modern family. This will help normalize adoption because there are no more traditional families of a mom, dad, 2.5 children, and the white picket fence. Today, families are made up of divorced, single, gay, biracial, not married partners, grandparents raising grandchildren. And it takes an especially sensitive parent to raise a child of a different race in our race-conscious society. When adopting internationally, there are a few variables to consider. The type of care. Is your child coming from a foster home care setting, or are they coming from an orphanage care setting? The age at which your child comes home. Your comfort level with transracial adoption. Keep in mind that children are placed into care due to poverty, abandonment, parental substance abuse, or neglect. The birth parents' medical histories are not always known, especially for abandoned children. And certain health risks are inherent when adopting internationally, such as malnutrition, parasites, hepatitis, and developmental delays. Generally, though, the more opportunities your child will have for physical contact, models of affection, language models, and stimulation, the better the outcome for your child, regardless of the type of care they lived in prior to their adoption or either of your races. There are orphanage care issues to consider. Your child may have had little or no prenatal care, may have never had immunizations, and they may suffer from malnutrition prior to placement. Children are also affected by living in an institution during critical developmental periods of their life. Therefore, for orphanage children, the age at placement into the orphanage and the duration of the time spent in the institution are critical factors. Some children have lived in an orphanage since their birth, and others are placed into care as an older child, having lived with their biological family for the first few years of their life. Stereotypically, infants and children in an orphanage usually receive less than adequate overall care. They'll have fewer chances for stimulation, poor nutrition, and little health care. Many children are not held when they are sick, so they learn not to cry. They are given medication to keep them quiet, and many even share toothbrushes. They'll have fewer opportunities to explore their environment and for social interactions. Infants in orphanage care usually arrive home between 9 and 20 months old, and this is considered a shorter time in care. Now, if all of the environmental variables are positive, and a child spends a minimal amount of time in an orphanage environment, and has strong survival skills, that child will have a decent chance of reducing any developmental gaps that they will come home with. There are issues with foster home care as well. Infants in foster care live with a host family and receive family-like care, not like you or I would treat it and care for a child, but family-like care. Foster care is typically short-term, and the children will usually arrive home between 3 and 9 months of age. Arriving home at this young age and living in foster care enables them a better chance of successfully attaching and bonding once being placed with their adoptive parents. Now, physicians who evaluate video and medical referrals and or examine children coming home from orphanages estimate that 1 month of cognitive and physical growth is lost for every 3 to 4 months spent in institutional care. And this is called institutional growth delay. Basically, the longer the child is in any type of temporary care, the higher the risk of post-institutional effects when they arrive home, such as poor attachment, problems with bonding, language delays, health issues, and school readiness concerns. There are transracial adoption issues to consider as well, because now you're an interracial family. Do you have preconceived judgments about certain races? How do you feel about the public attention or stares and questions you will naturally get as a visible adoptive family? Do you live in a culturally diverse community? Whose identity do you raise your child to affiliate with? Your culture or theirs? It's important to respect your child's country of origin. Each of your cultures is equally important. How do you feel about interracial marriage? Think about it, because you may be the only Caucasian person at your child's wedding. Are you prepared to help your child understand and feel comfortable with their heritage? Because other children may be asking them, "What are you?" So, what should you expect when coming home under a year of age? The first thing you need to do is go to a pediatrician who specializes in international adoption for a full physical exam within the first 2 weeks of arriving home. This age group probably will have the best chance to catch up developmentally. Learn to attach and bond, and be ready educationally and socially for school when they become of school age. We know that developmental milestones are dependent on genetics, prenatal care, and the quality of care given while in placement, and how young the baby is when they come home. Babies in care are not accustomed to being held, sleeping alone in a crib, and may be unfamiliar with male caregivers. So most babies will have sleep disturbances at first, until they get used to sleeping alone in a crib, in a quiet bedroom. That said, do anticipate current milestones to be delayed, regardless of the type of care. And understand that it is unknown if future milestones will be delayed too. For example, your baby's gross motor skills will probably be delayed, and it is normal to expect that a baby will arrive home, say at 9 months old, and not be sitting up yet, which would be expected from a 6-month-old. This does not mean that their speech and language will be delayed too, or that later milestones will be delayed. This reminds me of 2 families of my clients that had children that came home with baby boys at 8 months old. Both families had baby boys that came home at 8 months old, and they had lived in a foster home care setting prior to their arrival in the United States. With the first family, little Peter was developmentally delayed, as both were. Neither rolled over, neither were sitting up at 8 months old. So we knew that they were developmentally delayed. Little Peter's parents encouraged him by shaking a rattle next to him, trying to get him to roll over. By the time I came back 2 months later for his second post-placement supervision evaluation meeting, little Peter was now 10 months old. Not only was he rolling over, but he was sitting up, pulling himself to stand, and trying to cruise around the furniture. Peter's parents were very pleased. He came home developmentally delayed at 8 months old, but had caught up immediately. My other family, little Brian, he also was 8 months old and had lived in a foster home care setting, was not turning over and was not sitting up at 8 months old for my first visit. When I came back 2 months later for his second post-placement supervision evaluation, little Peter was still not sitting up, nor was he rolling over, despite all of the efforts by his adoptive parents. At that point, Brian's parents decided to access early intervention services. They realized that he was not developmentally delayed because of his early care, but because he was just developmentally delayed. If you believe that this is the case for your child, you'll want to access early intervention services. such as occupational therapy, physical therapy, and speech therapy. And if your baby's developmental milestones do not catch up within the first 4 to 6 months after arriving home, you should do so. In Brian's case, he was home for 2 months and had not caught up, and it was obvious that he was clearly developmentally delayed. I'm happy to report that now he is a 2-year-old and he is walking and he is doing just fine. What should you expect when arriving home during the preschool years, or ages 2 to 5? The first thing to do is to go to a pediatrician who specializes in international adoption for a full physical exam within the first 2 weeks of arriving home in order to assess developmental ability, possible delays, and preschool readiness issues. Your child may be unfamiliar with all the new smells, foods, and sounds at this time. So, do not overstimulate them with trips to the toy store. Remember, less is more. Developmental milestones will typically be delayed in this age group too. Should services be needed, a thorough, specialized evaluation should be completed. This can be done by contacting the local county Early Intervention Services office. In some areas, that may be called the Department of Health or the Bureau of Children's Services for Special Needs. Or you would be contacting your Committee for Preschool Special Education, your CPSE, services through your local school district special education coordinator. Which office to access services through depends on your child's age. Birth to up to 3 years old, services are obtained through the county. And if your child is 3 to 5 years old, services are received through the school district's Committee for Preschool Special Education. I had a family that adopted a little girl named Megan. She was 3 years old when she came home, and she had lived in an orphanage for all of her life in an Eastern European country. When she arrived home, she was developmentally delayed. She was immediately evaluated by an international pediatrician, and it was determined that she was not only developmentally delayed in English, but in her language as well. She did not know her colors, her shapes. She barely could even say her name in her language. She was evaluated through the Committee for Preschool Special Education, through the home school district where the family lived. And little Megan received services at a special education nursery school where she learned how to hold a crayon, something she had never done before because she had never even seen a crayon. She entered nursery school based on her readiness, not her age. During these years, you could take the opportunity to share your child's basic adoption information with school staff at your child's nursery school, as Megan's parents did. Try telling out other parents about adoption. You'll probably never see these people again, so think of it as a trial and error period where you can test out your comfort level. Megan is now a first grade student, and she's doing very well. She's on grade level and has adjusted very well to her family and her sibling. There are some common post-arrival issues with children that are ages 2 and over. Your child may not make eye contact, as this may have been considered disrespectful in their country. Your child may exhibit self-stimulating behaviors, such as rocking, headbanging, or they may indiscriminately show affection to strangers. They may have feeding difficulties, such as overeating, hoarding, or stealing food, because they do not understand that your home has an endless supply of food. You may have to lock up some of your cabinets if this becomes an issue. They may not like the consistency of certain foods or be able to chew food, as they are not used to food in the orphanage being in little pieces. They're used to food in the orphanage being mashed up so they didn't choke. Your child may have hygiene issues, where they do not want to bathe or brush their teeth, as they did not do so regularly before they came home. And they've never even used toothpaste before. A lot of the children haven't. This reminds me of a little girl named Christina. She was an older child that was adopted at the age of 8. and she came home after living in an Eastern European orphanage, having first lived with her biological family for the first few years of life. Christina was placed into care because of parental neglect and poverty. She lived in the orphanage for 5 years before being adopted by an American family. She came home at 8 years old. She did not want to brush her teeth. She had never seen or tasted toothpaste before. She certainly didn't want to bathe because they weren't required to do so in the orphanage. So it was a little challenging for her parents. But eventually, they did get her to bathe and to brush her teeth. Keep in mind, your child may have sleep disturbances too. That beautiful prince or princess bedroom with that brightly colored bedding and paint that you painstakingly prepared for their arrival may be very scary, as he or she has never slept alone before, and they may worry that you will not be there when they awaken in the morning. So, try to maximize and strengthen the parent and child bond by increasing your interactions while reading together, holding and hugging each other, and reassuring your child that adoption is forever. So what should you expect when coming home with a school-age child and beyond, 5 years old and over? Well, remember, the first thing you need to do is to go to a pediatrician who specializes in international adoption for a full physical exam within the first 2 weeks of arriving home in order to assess your child's developmental ability, identify possible delays, and school readiness issues. Your child may be overwhelmed with so many choices at this age, so make sure to create simple rules and routines to follow, along with only a choice of A or B. Makes it very simple for them. Basically, they are in culture shock. They're thinking in another language first, and then translating. So if they don't answer you right away, remember that. They're translating first. Their short attention span may be due to the translating. So do not rush to diagnose a problem too quickly. And in New York State, a new entrant to a public school must have a new entrance Chapter 53 screening by the school staff. All children who come from private school, out of state, or from another country are required to be screened, not just children that are adopted internationally. And this screening should consist of a basic educational, speech and language, gross motor, and health screening, as well as a social history that's completed with the school social worker. If your child does not speak English when they arrive home, which all don't, or I would say mostly don't, the school district should arrange for a screening in their native language within the first 2 weeks so their language is not lost yet, and testing results will be more accurate. This testing may determine that your child may have delays in cognitive and social readiness at different levels, for example. A child may be cognitively ready for school. They're bright, they're able to pay attention, but be socially immature, have difficulty sharing, or not get along well with their peer group. Just because your child attended school in his or her country while residing in an orphanage doesn't mean that they're ready to enter the same grade level here. Even if their records say they're on grade level, our school system tends to be more advanced and has a different level of standards and expectations that some of the Eastern European schools have. So, in order to ensure school success, match your child's actual age with the level of instruction being taught and the requirements for a particular grade, with his or her individual level of cognitive and social functioning. You have a couple of options. Delay entry into kindergarten or first grade for 1 year, as Megan's parents did. They had her stay in nursery school for 1 extra year before entering kindergarten. That way, she was ready cognitively and socially to enter school. If you're adopting an older child, you may consider placing them in a grade level back by 1 year, as Christina's parents did. Instead of having her enter the 3rd grade, they had her enter the 2nd grade as an 8-year-old. That way, she had a little bit of an edge on the students that were in the school. She was able to master the English language, become adjusted to her new family, bathing, brushing her teeth, and realizing that this is her forever family. There are some school-age red flags to look out for, though. If your child is functioning more than 2 to 3 years below their chronological age, or your child has specific identifiable disabilities since arriving home, or there are red flags from their orphanage records, do not wait to seek help. Your child may need special education, psychological intervention, or medical services. And if services seem needed, a thorough, specialized evaluation should be completed by contacting your local school district special education coordinator to request testing. If you suspect a need for therapeutic interventions beyond the scope of the school for problems such as ADHD, anxiety, and attachment issues, you may want to contact an international adoption pediatrician for guidance. This concludes the course, What to Expect When Arriving Home with the Internationally Adopted Child. Please proceed to the online quiz. When you successfully complete the quiz, you will be issued a certificate of completion. This will meet the requirements for The Hague. Good luck on your journey to creating your forever family. Thank you.